Hi, I'm Stacy from the blog thefromscratchfarmhouse.com, and today I'm going to be giving you a tour of my garden. We are located in Zone 4B, and it is currently the end of July, so it is peak gardening season here in northern Wisconsin. Along with giving you a tour, I'm going to be sharing the things I tried this year that are working wonderfully, as well as the things that I will not be repeating in the future. Also, at the end, I'm going to be sharing with you the number one thing that changed the whole gardening game for me and has made me have the most successful garden in my 15 years of gardening. It has been the best garden, the most productive garden so far, and I'm excited to see what else it brings. But I think that this change is going to help you a lot in your gardening experience as well, so stay tuned for that. Okay, first of all, my main garden is 60 feet long by 50 feet wide, which at first seemed like a huge space once we first tilled it, but it quickly got filled up, and next year I will be looking to expand it. In my garden this year, from left to right, I have potatoes, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, yellow onions, red onions, beets, kohlrabi, cauliflower over here as well, tomatoes galore, mostly Roma, a few beefsteak, basil, provider bush green beans, rutabaga on the end there, peppers. I have jalapenos, banana peppers, chili peppers, zucchini, yellow squash, some cherry tomatoes, watermelon, two types of cucumbers. I have both pickling cucumbers on the end here and then some slicing cucumbers down there. I also had some lettuce, herbs, sunflowers, sweet potatoes, and radishes down in my raised beds. I'd actually planned to plant way more crops than I even did, but I'm happy with what got in the garden. We had a late start because we couldn't find a tiller, we couldn't find somebody to till the ground, and it was totally a fresh spot, new area for a garden, so that was kind of stressful to begin with. And then once we got it tilled, it was just a matter of getting crops in the ground. It didn't even matter what at that point. I just needed my garden planted. In this first section here, I have potatoes. So there's 3 rows of potatoes. And the way that we planted these was to dig a trench, just a shallow trench all the way down, plant the potatoes about a foot apart, and then cover them with the soil. As soon as the potatoes broke through the soil, I then covered them with straw. As soon as they broke through the straw, I added more straw. And I continued to do this until they were hilled up with the straw, as you can see here. This has worked so wonderfully this year. I will definitely be doing it in the future. I guess I can't say how productive it will be, but my thought is that I'm going to get a lot more potatoes out of this than I have ever before. The reason I actually went with the straw in the first place is because this area, being as it's a new garden, newly tilled this year, the grass really wanted to take over again, and so the straw was a way to keep the grass and the weeds down and allow the potatoes to still grow through without that competition. That worked way better than I could have ever guessed. It kept all the grass and weeds down, and the potatoes have thrived. In the fall, I will definitely do another video showing how many potatoes we're going to get out of these 3 60-foot rows, but I have a feeling it's going to be my best, most productive potato season yet. Alright, since we discussed a success, I'll go on to a definite failure, and that is my brassicas. Although I was able to come in here and harvest the main heads of broccoli just a few weeks ago, and actually I got quite a bit of broccoli out of there, my cabbage and my cauliflower are not doing great. A lot of my brassicas are not doing great because of insects. The insects have been so hard on my brassicas this year. The worms, the cabbage worms, have taken over. When I went to harvest my broccoli and clean it, even though I soaked it in salt water as best I could, there were so many worms left. It was so disgusting. I guess it's not a complete failure because I am getting a crop out of it. From this 60-foot row of broccoli, I'm probably going to get between 4 and 5 gallon Ziploc bags of frozen broccoli. So on a few of these heads, I've already harvested the main stalk. So like this one is not quite ready. This one is not quite ready, so I'll give these a few more days and harvest those. But then after you harvest the main head, you can start harvesting these side shoots. So I should take these today, and there's more coming up here. So even after that main head is harvested, you will still get quite a bit depending on the variety. Not bad, but definitely could be better. The cauliflower hasn't loved the heat this year, but it's doing okay. I'm going to go ahead and harvest this head. There's some discoloration, and I probably could have closed up these leaves to blanch it a little bit and keep it whiter, but I don't mind it. It's fine. I will harvest this, and then I will get all the worms out and make use of it. Okay, here is the biggest failure here, my cabbage. My cabbage is pretty much gone to the worms, as you can see. There's a few that I will harvest today and try to get what I can out of them, but you can see these ones here are pretty much not even worth harvesting. Definitely my biggest failure by far. You can also see that there is some weeds going on around the plants, which I'm sure didn't help. Had I been on top of it, I would have put the mulch and the straw around these plants. By the time I did this though, I knew that a lot of these cabbages were going to the worms anyway, so I didn't feel it was worth my time, but in the future I will mulch like this from the beginning. I think the worst part about this failure is all of the space that could have been used for something else, and instead pretty much was just lunch for the bugs. As for my problems with the brassicas and all of the bugs, my solution to that is going to be to plant all of my brassicas together, and I'm going to be using bug netting across them. So that's something that I've looked at in the past and just didn't purchase this year, but I definitely think it's going to be worth purchasing in the future so that I can get a better crop out of my brassicas, especially my cabbage. Okay, I want to talk to you about a success and a failure here. The success being this plastic. So this is just black plastic mulch. We laid this at the beginning of the growing season. My kids helped me bury it under the soil so that it wouldn't lift up in the wind. And then we went through with a torch and burnt these holes into the plastic. So they are nicely spaced, which makes it more visually appealing, but it also keeps weeds from growing through and heats up the ground to help a lot of my heat-loving crops do even better. The black plastic has been a game changer. I have very little weeding to do. I'm able to keep up, so I will definitely be doing the black plastic in the future. Also, this row between my brassicas here was originally just soil. Even though I used plastic and landscape fabric in other areas of my garden, I had left this dirt just to see if I could keep up on it, and it was such a disaster. So then I started putting grass clippings and some straw down, and that has worked so well. So if you don't like plastic in your garden, this is definitely the next best thing. I do think the plastic works a little better and it's a little easier to keep up on, but this is definitely more environmentally friendly and works amazing. This little patch of grass and weeds down here at the end is where some of my potatoes didn't actually come up, and so I didn't bother to mulch, which in hindsight I still should have for aesthetics. So the grass and the weeds have definitely taken over, but it just shows how much that mulch, the straw mulch, works. And definitely next year I'm going to be mulching everywhere in the garden where there is not plastic or landscape fabric. A gardening fail of the year was when we didn't have irrigation set up and it was extremely dry. I had to figure out a way to water. So I was hauling hoses through here, which is a horrible idea. And this is why. These onions are prematurely falling over here because they were hit with a hose as I was trying to haul it through here and set up a sprinkler. So in the future, my plan is to put a couple hoses through my garden that permanently stay there, and then I can rotate my cheap sprinkler around, and that worked fine. But I definitely don't want to be hauling hoses through here anymore. The plants that I have next to these onions here are kohlrabi, and I've never grown kohlrabi. I wasn't sure how much we would use them or how they would do, and at first they were really buggy, so I was a little bit worried that they wouldn't do well and didn't end up planting much more, which I'm kind of regretting it now because they're looking great. So I'm excited to harvest these and see how much our family actually makes use of them. Along with the onions here, I just planted some beets for a fall crop. So I plan to pick these in the fall and then can and put some in my root cellar. They're just coming up. I double seeded most of them, so I need to go through and thin and then replant any holes that didn't grow. Believe it or not, my onions are actually doing way better than I have ever had them do in the past. But I'm still learning. I'm still making a lot of mistakes. A couple things that I did this year that I will do differently next year are I will plant them way earlier next year. My garden was actually not prepped until late spring, so that's the only reason I didn't get them in earlier. My plan is to till and mulch and have it prepped this fall so that in the spring, as soon as the ground is workable, I can go ahead and plant. The other thing I've heard with the onions is that if you plant them too deeply, they'll have a hard time forming a large bulb. I'm not sure. I feel like I'm going to have to do some more research on exactly where and how you're supposed to plant them, but I kind of wonder, because some of them are definitely doing better than others, if I didn't make this mistake when I planted. The things that did go well with the onions were planting them from seed, which was amazingly easy to do, and I think it gave me a much better crop. Also, it was very nice having these onions planted in plastic, because weeding onions can be a pain, and I've been known to take them out while trying to weed quickly, so having them each have their own hole like this was really nice. My raised beds that are so nice looking here at the end of my garden are both a success and a failure, I would say. I love them for some reasons. I think it's really easy to plant in and keep the weeds out of. However, they are really hard to keep watered in hot weather. I do not have any irrigation system, and they just dry out so quickly. So I think in the future, I'm going to have to run irrigation lines to these beds. This path along my raised beds is another area where I did not put anything down, plastic or mulch, and you can see the weeds and the grass just took over. I had intended to put plastic down here and never got to it, and it doesn't really affect production. It's just another aesthetics thing, but it just shows the mulch and the plastic have been so helpful, and definitely without those things, these weeds and grass would have just taken over. I wouldn't have been able to keep up. Okay, one more failure, and then I'll just share the rest of my successes. This one really surprised me because I have grown bush beans a million times before, and I've never had a problem. But I don't know if it's the weather or what, but these beans have taken off. They are massive, and that has been a huge problem because they've been falling over. I have never had to stake or support my bush beans in the past, and this year they obviously need it. They're actually breaking off at the stem. So in the future, I will be doing a weave system to support them. I think I might still put that in now so that I don't lose any more with strong winds or rain. So in order to do that, I will put posts on either ends of the bed and then use something, rope or string, to weave in and out and help support the sides so they don't just fall over. I have never planted this much basil. I am super happy with it. We've been getting a ton. I've been picking it and then it just regrows. And we're going to have a ton of pesto saved up for the winter, so that is really exciting. All of my heat-loving plants, my basil, my peppers, my tomatoes, they are all doing amazing. I haven't had any signs of disease or anything really. A few times I did have to come in and save them with some water, just because our weather has been so crazy this year and super dry. But other than that, they're loving this heat. They are thriving. I have a million tomatoes out there. They just have to ripen and we will be drowning in tomatoes. To support my tomatoes this year, I have been using these cattle panels, and you can see this one is actually kind of leaning over just from the weight, but for the most part, they're working great. I didn't realize how much these Roma tomatoes bushed out. I don't actually usually grow Romas, but I think it'll be fine. I can continue to tie them to these panels, and I think next year what I would do differently is put another support T-post in the middle of the panels to help hold it up. But other than that, the cattle panels for plant support has been super easy and pretty effective, as long as you're willing to get out there and actually spend the time to take the plants and tie them to the panels, because otherwise they just end up in the walkway. I also saw online that you can use t-shirts cut up in strips, and that sounds like it would probably work even better and not risk hurting the stems of the tomatoes, so I might try that next year as well. Okay, holy zucchini. I planted just a few plants, and you know how that usually goes, which I've always gotten a lot of zucchini, but I have never in my life seen a zucchini plant this tall. Just to give you an idea, this plant here is actually taller than my 2.5-year-old. It is massive, and it's spitting out zucchini daily. So definitely the zucchinis are doing well in this hot weather. The peppers have also loved the heat and the dry weather. I'm getting so many peppers. I plan to can some and also freeze some and just try a bunch of different methods of preserving them. I haven't done a ton of peppers in the past, so I'm excited to play around and see what works best for our family. Banana peppers are a pepper that our family eats a lot of, so I will be pickling these to have on hand throughout the winter. I'm super excited about that. I have not grown very many peppers in the past because we live in a cooler climate, but this year we have had such hot weather. They're doing amazing. My cucumbers definitely aren't growing as quickly as I expected, but they're doing okay, and I am starting to get cucumbers, so I think in the next few days I'm going to start making pickles. The cattle panel trellis has also worked pretty well for these, although it does take some effort to come in and train them to the trellis. They don't just naturally grow up on their own like I had hoped. Some of them do, but most of them are like this and need a little help getting hooked on so that they can climb up. I'm thinking the reason that my cucumbers are a little slow this year is our lack of rain. Normally here in northern Wisconsin, we do not have to irrigate. We do not have to even water our gardens. I know it sounds crazy, but for the last 4 years that I've lived here, that's how it's been. So this year's kind of thrown me for a loop. I didn't even own a sprinkler, so I did have to go get one, and we have had to water a few times. But I think that I probably haven't been watering these cucumbers enough. They're just showing signs like they could use a little bit more water. Okay, I've never successfully grown a watermelon, so I'm really hoping that this year will be the year. I have a few little baby watermelons. Now I'm not going to be able to find them. Oh, here we go. Here's one. But I don't know. It's already the end of July, so we'll see if anything comes of that. Also, originally I thought that my watermelons would climb this as well, but I don't know. I'm a little bit nervous that if I did grow a watermelon, they'd get too heavy and then I'd have to support them up there somehow. And they actually have plenty of room down this aisle. There's no reason I really need to be right here because I can harvest the zucchini from the other side. So I'm just going to let them sprawl for now and see how that goes. A big majority of my garden is tomato plants, which it kind of looks ridiculous how many I have planted. I think I counted 54, but really tomato products is something that we go through a lot of between ketchup and pizza sauces and canned tomatoes and diced tomatoes and tomato paste, and I mean there's so many tomato products, and it's pretty exciting to think that this year might be the year we produce 100% of our tomato products. So I'm really looking forward to all of these ripening. There are so many on these bushes, and I can't wait to show you all that I get out of it. Behind this row of beans here, I have rutabaga, and I wasn't sure that they were going to even make it because the leaves were so eaten. I'm not sure what's eating them. I've asked friends on Instagram, and we're not really sure exactly. I haven't been able to find anything. The only thought I had was maybe grasshoppers, but I don't know. You can tell me by looking at these holes what you think is eating away at these leaves. Let me know in the comments if you know what likes to eat rutabaga. But despite all of that, I feel like these are growing really well, and I'll probably still get a crop out of them. So pretty exciting, given as I was about to just rip them out because I thought they wouldn't survive, and now they look like they're doing really well. I haven't been super great about weeding this area. This is actually just where the plastic pulled up, so it just needs to be tacked back down. So that's easy enough, but some of these holes, see, even with the rutabaga, there is some grass growing in those holes along with the plant, so it probably wouldn't hurt to come in here and get rid of that. At the end of this tomato row here, I have 3 circles, although you can't tell they're circles right now, of kidney beans. I have not had much success with dry beans in the past, so I'm excited that these are actually looking really good. I also had planned to put some bean teepees in here and never got around to it, but these are actually holding their weight pretty well. But I don't want them to knock over like the other ones, so I think I will come in here with some probably just posts and then try tying them to the posts to help them stay upright and not knock over with their weight. The star of the show from day one has been these cherry tomatoes. I actually purchased these starts and they were pretty big by the time I brought them home. They had a pretty big head start, but it was so nice because pretty soon after planting, I was already getting yummy, fresh from the vine tomatoes, and the kids love to just come out and harvest these and snack on them. And I don't worry too much about preserving the cherry tomatoes. Oh, especially these orange ones. They are delicious. If you have not had orange cherry tomatoes, I highly recommend them. Also, at the beginning of summer, right here behind these cherry tomatoes was a wonderful place to plant lettuce. It didn't bolt because it wasn't getting that direct sun in the morning. However, this heat has been way more than we're used to here. I did not buy varieties that are bolt resistant, so eventually they did take off and they would probably be pretty bitter to harvest now. But I will be planting more in the fall in areas that are opening up in my garden so that we have fresh lettuce again. These pots on the end here were just ones that I grabbed for $5 at Home Depot, and they have actually been producing these large, delicious peppers. It's called a candy cane pepper. I don't know, not bad for $5, and it's been producing all summer. I've definitely had both successes and failures in my garden this year, but I think that is part of the fun of gardening, is learning what works in your area, in your soil, trying new things, seeing if you can up the production. And so I am completely thrilled with my garden despite the failures, and I'm excited to see how much we get out of this garden by fall, and I'm excited to try it all again next year. Okay, are you ready to hear my #1 secret for having the most successful gardening year ever? This year, I started following the advice of an Instagram account that I follow, and I will put her Instagram handle below because I cannot take any credit for this. But following this advice has been such a game changer. And her advice was to get into the garden first thing in the morning. So before I have breakfast, before the kids even wake up, as early as I can get myself out here, I come out to the garden. The weather is cooler and it's just beautiful. The birds are singing. It is such a wonderful time to be out in the garden, and just doing that first thing also doesn't give me any excuses for not getting to it. Because if I was to get up and get kids ready first or eat breakfast and get started on something else, there's a good chance that I'm not going to make it out here, or if I do, it's going to be so hot and miserable, I'm not going to enjoy it. So, #1 tip by far, get out to the garden every morning first thing, even if it's just 30 minutes in the morning, walking through your garden, seeing what needs to be done, picking off pests that need to come off the leaves, whatever it is that you need to do. That 30 minutes or an hour every morning is going to make such a difference. It's going to help you stay caught up on your garden, stay caught up on weeding, and help you get an eye on what needs to be done in the future as well. This has changed the game for me, and I know it will for you too. So make sure that you check out Ruth Ann Zimmerman's Instagram and YouTube channel. Her content has been such an inspiration to me, and I know that you will enjoy it as well. Hopefully you enjoyed this tour through my garden and maybe learned something as well to help you in your future gardens. If you enjoyed this video, if you could please give me a thumbs up, that would mean so much to me, and make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss my future content.